Once I've got the house, I don't need him. My fiancée texted her friend before falsely accusing me of attacking her and lying to the cops. She thought she'd destroyed me. The judge threw her out instead, and now she's broke, disgraced, and permanently silenced. Hey, Reddit! I'm a firefighter, thought I had life figured out, until my fiancé set me up and I landed in cuffs. Here's how it started. My name's Damian Voss. I fight fires for a living. That means running into buildings everyone else runs out of, dragging people through smoke so thick you can't see your own boots, and pulling down ceilings with a pike pole while the place is collapsing on top of you. It's not glamorous, but it's real. When the sirens shut off and the smoke clears, you don't get applause. You go home smelling like ash and hope your gear dries before the next shift. You'd think dating someone would be easier than dragging hose lines up 4 flights of stairs. Turns out I was wrong. Serena Vale was my fiancée. On paper, she checked every box. Smart, funny in her way, great at making herself the center of attention. She knew how to light up a room when she wanted to. The problem was she also didn't know how to turn it off. She always needed to be seen, admired, validated. And when people looked at me with respect, firefighters get that kind of nod in public, the one that says, "This guy's solid," I swear I could feel her jaw tighten. You ever been at a party where you feel like the punchline and you didn't even tell a joke? That was me half the time when Serena was around. We were at a friend's game night once, sitting around this cluttered living room with pizza boxes stacked on the counter and cheap beer cans on the floor. Somebody asked me about a fire we'd run the week before. Before I could answer, Serena laughed and said, "Oh, Damien? He just sprays water. Don't let him act like it's anything more." Everyone chuckled awkwardly. I forced a smile, but inside I noted it. One of many little digs. That was her way. She could never just let me have a moment. If I told a story, she'd add a twist to make me look slow or careless. If someone complimented me, she'd smirk and say something about me acting like a hero at home too. And when I didn't bite, when I just gave her that flat look, she hated it. The fights usually came later, behind closed doors. They weren't about bills or chores, not really. They were about her wanting me to play her game, feed her insecurity, tell her she was the star, not me. She'd accuse me of being cold, detached, and maybe I am. I don't sugarcoat. You either trust me or you don't. That night, it started the same way. We were in my place. Quiet evening. Nothing special. I'd just gotten off a long shift and was half sunk into the couch. Serena stood in front of the mirror near the hall, adjusting her makeup even though we weren't going anywhere. She asked if I'd posted the picture she'd sent me earlier. I hadn't. I told her I forgot. She turned, hand on her hip. Forgot or just didn't bother? I looked up at her, tired but calm. It's not that deep, Serena. I was at work, not scrolling Instagram. Wrong answer. She launched into it, how I never put her first, how I get respect out there but make her invisible in here. She wanted to be seen, she said. Wanted people to know she mattered. I leaned back, arms crossed. You need strangers to like your selfies. That's on you. I drag people out of burning apartments. I'm not worried about filters. She glared at me, lips pressed tight. The silence stretched. I added, if you want a PR guy, go date one. I'm not signing up for that role. That's when she really snapped. Not screaming yet, but her whole face shifted. She started pacing, arms waving, throwing out words like selfish, arrogant, ungrateful. I let her go, answering every few lines with something short and sharp. Arrogant? No, just honest. Ungrateful? I bought the house, paid in full. You're welcome. Every sarcastic reply I gave just wound her tighter. She wanted me to blow up, match her volume. I didn't. I've stood in rooms with flames rolling across the ceiling. I'm not raising my voice over a tantrum. At one point, she grabbed her phone off the counter and set it near the edge of the coffee table, screen angled up just enough to catch the room. She figured I wouldn't notice. A thin red glow from the record UI pulsed on the TV's glass. Recording. I didn't call her out. Not then. I just clocked it. Added it to the growing file in my head of Serena's moments. She was still pacing, still venting about how she deserved more, how she'd wasted her time with me. I cut in, calm as ever. Serena, you want a crown? Go buy one. Amazon's got free shipping. But stop pretending I'm the villain, because I don't clap every time you breathe. She froze, staring at me like I'd just slapped her. Her eyes narrowed. That's when I saw it. The switch flip. That look she gave right before she went from pouty to dangerous. I didn't know it yet, but that was the moment she decided to light the match on everything. The fight didn't die down like I thought it would. Normally, Serena would blow up, storm off to the bedroom, slam a door or two, and then reappear half an hour later with that wounded look she'd perfected. Not this time. She stayed in the living room, circling me like a lawyer grilling a witness. Why don't you ever admit you're wrong? She snapped, pacing across the carpet. Because I'm not wrong, I said, keeping my voice even. Her eyes narrowed. You think you're untouchable. Out there, you play the hero. But in here, you're nothing. You're a selfish... Careful, I cut in, deadpan. You're about to run out of adjectives. That did it. She froze for a second. Then I watched her face twist into something sharp. It wasn't just anger anymore. It was calculation. Serena took 2 quick steps toward the coffee table, grabbed her phone, and swiped the screen. Suddenly, my own voice filled the room. It was me, or at least it sounded like me, barking, "You don't matter. I don't need you." The audio clipped in and out. The background hum changed, but unless you listened closely, it was convincing enough. She stood there, arms crossed, watching my reaction. You've been editing our arguments? I asked flatly. Her chin lifted. Just proving what kind of man you are. I laughed once, short and humorless. You really need a hobby. She didn't like that answer. She needed me to panic. Instead, I leaned back on the couch, arms crossed, and waited to see what else she had planned. That's when she moved to the shelf by the wall and grabbed the heavy glass vase my grandmother left me. It had sat there for years, untouched, with fake flowers sticking out of it. She raised it shoulder high and hurled it against the drywall. It shattered, glass spraying across the hardwood, shards skittering under the couch. She turned back to me, breathing heavy, eyes wild. Then, with one smooth motion, she dragged her manicured nails down her forearm. Thin red lines rose instantly, enough to bead, but not gush. Are you kidding me right now? I asked, staring at her. She tilted her head, her expression flipping from rage to fear so fast it was almost comical. Stay away from me, she shrieked, stepping back. Her voice cracked in just the right places, trembling like she'd practiced. I stood slowly. Serena, don't do this. This is my house, she screamed, pointing toward the door. It's literally not, I said calmly. Title's in my name. Her hand shook as she lifted her phone. Not for long. Then she pressed 911. I didn't stop her. I just stood there, arms loose at my sides, listening as she delivered an award-winning performance to the dispatcher. Her voice dripped with panic, shaky breaths between sentences. My fiancé just snapped, she sobbed into the receiver. He threw a vase at me. He's screaming. I'm bleeding. I don't feel safe. I closed my eyes for a second, breathing slow. The sheer audacity of it almost impressed me. Almost. By the time the patrol cars pulled up, Serena was sitting on the front porch steps with her head in her hands, shoulders shaking. She looked like a painting of grief. The scratch on her arm was bright against her pale skin. Glass glittered on the floor inside, and I was standing in the doorway, stone silent. 2 officers approached. One was older, mid-40s, with lines in his face that said he'd seen too many domestic calls already. The other was young, fresh out of academy, shifting nervously as he scanned the scene. Sir, step outside, the older one said firmly. I did. Hands visible, movement slow. I knew the drill. I wasn't going to give them any reason to escalate. The younger one crouched next to Serena. Ma'am, can you tell me what happened? She lifted her tear-streaked face, her voice cracking perfectly on cue. He lost control. He threw that vase at me, and then he grabbed me. She held up the faint scratch on her arm. And I thought he was going to kill me. The officer's eyes flicked to me, then back to her. I spoke before anyone asked me. That's a nice story. Shame about the special effects. I gestured toward the wall where the vase hit. Thrown glass travels. This pattern hugs the wall. That's a smash, not a throw. But sure, let's pretend physics are optional. The older cop frowned. Sir, now's not the time. I shrugged. You're right. Save it for court. They separated us. Standard procedure. The older one cuffed me while the younger one kept Serena in her performance bubble. She avoided looking at me until the cuffs clicked. Then her eyes cut sideways. And there it was. That little smirk. The one she couldn't hide. The officer tightened the cuffs just enough to make them dig into my wrists. You're under arrest, he said, his tone flat. I didn't argue. I didn't resist. I just gave Serena a long look. No anger, no begging. Just a steady stare that told her exactly what I was thinking. You've overplayed your hand. As they walked me toward the cruiser, Serena leaned slightly, just enough for her whisper to reach me over the sound of the radio chatter. Have fun in jail, Damien. I smiled, dry as dust. You'll run out of mascara before I run out of patience. Her smirk faltered for half a second. Then the car door closed, and the world outside blurred as the cruiser pulled away. They dropped me in a holding cell that smelled like bleach and old sweat, the kind of place you'd expect to see on a cop show, only less dramatic and more depressing. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, too bright for the dingy concrete walls. The bench was metal, cold even through my jeans. The door clanged shut and echoed down the hall. I leaned back against the wall and stared at the chipped paint. It wasn't my first time in a station, but it was the first time I'd been on this side of the bars. A guy 2 cells down was snoring like a busted chainsaw. Somewhere further away, a phone rang. Muffled voices answered. Then footsteps passed by without stopping. Time didn't move in there. Every minute stretched into 10. I rubbed the side of my head and let out a slow breath. I wasn't worried about the charge sticking, not with the right eyes on the evidence. But the process itself? That was the problem. Arrest records, suspensions, hearings. Even if I walked out free tomorrow, Serena had already fired the first shot. That's when the thought hit me. I still had one call. My father, Chief Ryland Kane. To the rest of the city, he was the police chief. To me, he was the guy I'd been avoiding for years. I'd taken my mother's last name at 18 just to put distance between us. He'd been strict, demanding, always pushing me toward the academy. I wanted my own path, so I chose firefighting. We'd spoken, sure, but it was strained. More nods at family events than real conversations. I picked up the wall phone when the guard finally waved me over. The receiver was sticky. The cord barely reached my ear. I punched in the number I hadn't used in years. It rang twice before a low, steady voice answered. Kane. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. It's me. Damien A. Pause. Not long, but long enough. Where are you? Central Precinct. Holding cell. Another pause. What happened? My fiancée staged it. Scratched herself, smashed a vase, called it an attack. They bought it. Silence again. Then just one word. Understood. That was it. No lecture, no questions. Just that weight in his tone, like a door had closed somewhere far away. I'm not asking for a favor, I said quickly. Just, I need this handled right. You'll hear from me soon, he said. Then the line clicked dead. I stood there a second, staring at the receiver, before hanging it up. My father never wasted words. He didn't need to. If he said he'd move, he'd move. Hours stretched. A guard brought me a paper cup of water. He didn't meet my eyes. The snoring down the hall cut in and out like static. I stayed calm, detached. That's who I am. Let Serena think she'd cornered me. Let her enjoy her little victory lap. Because I knew what she didn't. This wasn't over. Not even close. The door buzzed, and a man I hadn't seen before stepped in. Tall, maybe mid-40s, shirt sleeves rolled up, no nonsense in his eyes. He carried a slim notebook and a pen. He introduced himself without wasting a second. Detective Marrow, I'm re-examining your case. His tone wasn't friendly, but it wasn't hostile either. It was clinical, measured. He asked for my version of events. Not a long speech. Just the key points. I told him about the vase, the scratch, the recording, the way Serena staged it all. He scribbled notes quickly, not interrupting, but his eyebrows twitched when I mentioned the audio clipping. That told me he'd already suspected it. Marrow didn't linger. He closed the notebook, nodded once, and left. That was his style. Efficient. In and out. The door at the end of the hall opened, and Chief Ryland Kane walked in. He wasn't in uniform. Just a dark suit, tie knotted perfectly, coat buttoned, but you didn't need the badge to know who he was. The entire room seemed to align around him. Younger officers stiffened. The desk sergeant sat up straighter. Even the buzzing lights felt quieter. That's what years of command does. Presence alone fills the room. He didn't come storming in, didn't slam his fist on the desk. That wasn't his way. He walked calmly to the duty sergeant, voice steady. He'd already recused himself from decisions and kicked the review to an outside unit, Marrow's, so nobody could claim he tilted the table. I reviewed the arrest report, he said. I didn't see any documentation about the glass shards. Were photos taken of where they landed? The sergeant's face tightened. I'll need to check, Chief. You do that, Ryland replied evenly, because glass thrown at a wall breaks differently than glass smashed against it. It's basic evidence. He turned to the younger officer, Hayes, the one who'd cuffed me. And you. Did you examine the injury? Hayes shifted on his feet. She had a visible scratch. Protocol required. Protocol requires judgment, my father interrupted. His voice didn't rise, but it cut like steel. Did you check her nails for residue? Did you confirm the wound pattern matched her claim? Or did you accept a performance at face value? Hayes swallowed hard. No, sir. I didn't check. Ryland's gaze held on him a moment too long, then shifted away. He wasn't there to humiliate anyone, just to make a point. Within an hour, the paperwork shuffled again. The door to my cell opened, and a nervous officer unlocked the cuffs. "Mr. Voss, you're free to go. You'll be contacted for further statements. For now, you're released." I stepped out. The hall was busy, but strangely quiet. My father stood by the desk, hands clasped behind his back. He didn't smile. He didn't need to. "You okay?" he asked, low enough for just me. "I'm fine," I said. "Stay away from her," he told me. "Let the system handle it." That was all. Not a reunion, not a lecture. Just the rules of engagement laid out plain. I nodded. My phone buzzed the second I powered it back on. One new text from Serena. "This isn't over. The house is mine." I stared at the screen for a moment, then slid the phone back into my pocket without typing a word. I didn't drive home. Not yet. Instead, I turned the wheel and headed across town. The lights were still on in a strip mall office where my lawyer kept late hours. The kind of guy who didn't care what time it was if the work needed doing. When I walked in, damp from the rain, he raised his eyebrows but didn't ask questions. I told him everything. The fight, the vase, the scratch, the arrest, my father's arrival. He listened, tapping a pen on his desk, eyes sharp. When I finished, he leaned back and said simply, "All right, then we file a counter. Malicious prosecution, restraining order, all of it. If she wants a war, we'll give her one." He extended his hand across the desk. I shook it. No ceremony, no speeches, just business. For the first time that night, I felt the ground steady beneath me again. Detective Cole Marrow didn't waste time. Over the next week, he dug into the mess Serena had created. He showed up with a thin folder, sat across from me at my lawyer's office, and asked questions like he was checking boxes in his head. Direct, sharp, no fluff. First thing he tackled was the scene itself. By midweek, crime scene techs went back to my place and photographed everything. Every shard of glass still left on the floor. When Marrow spread the photos out across the desk, the pattern spoke for itself. The majority of the shards were clustered tight against the wall, with the rest scattered outward in a wide fan. He tapped the photo with his pen. If it had been thrown at her, shards would have traveled farther into the room, not hugged the wall like this. This was a smash against the surface. My lawyer leaned forward. "That matches what my client told you." Marrow gave a small nod. He didn't give credit for free, but I could see the confirmation in his eyes. He flipped to the next section. The audio. Serena had played her greatest hit for the responding officers. A clip of me supposedly shouting at her. Early in the week, Marrow sent it to digital forensics. The analysis showed splicing all over the place. Background hums didn't match. Words clipped mid-syllable. Even a stretch where my breathing pattern jumped like someone cut tape and glued it back together. "She stitched together bits from separate arguments," Marrow explained. "Good enough to fool someone hearing it cold. Not good enough to hold up under review." I sat back in my chair. She really thought she could build a case out of scrap audio and broken glass. "She thought you wouldn't fight back," my lawyer said. Marrow moved on. The injury. He had the ER report from a forensic nurse examiner, SANE, on Serena's scratch. Long, straight lines, evenly spaced. No bruising, no irregular tears. Nothing that looked like a defensive wound. "Consistent with a superficial self-inflicted injury," he said flatly. "It doesn't match her claim." Piece by piece, the story was falling apart. But Marrow wasn't done. He pulled out a printed text log, highlighted sections marked with sticky tabs. Investigators obtained a warrant for her cloud backups and pulled the message threads, then printed the relevant excerpts. The first one was a message from Serena to her friend a week before the fight. "He won't give me the life I want. I'll take it." Another one. "Once I've got the house, I don't need him." My stomach tightened as I read them. She hadn't just lost her temper. She'd planned it. "That's not all," Marrow added. He flipped to another page. These were texts from just 2 days after I was arrested. Serena messaged a different friend, asking them to back her up if police called, to say they'd seen me get aggressive before. The friend never answered. Instead, they forwarded the entire conversation to the department. "She's trying to build a false witness pool," Marrow said. "That's obstruction. And the fact her friend turned it over? Not a good sign for her credibility." I couldn't help it. I let out a low laugh. She really thought people would lie for her. Shows how little she understands loyalty. My lawyer was already writing notes, his pen moving fast. "We'll add this to the counter petition. Malicious prosecution, abuse of process. We're filing first thing tomorrow." The legal side was moving, but my personal life needed space. I couldn't stay in my house, not with everything circling. So I rented a small one-bedroom near the station. Nothing fancy. Air mattress on the floor, a couple plastic drawers, a coffee pot. Simple, but it was mine. And more importantly, it was quiet. The first night I slept there, the silence hit me harder than I expected. No Serena clattering around in heels, no constant hum of her music in the background, no arguments waiting to happen. Just stillness. A few nights later, I met my father for dinner at a diner halfway between my rental and the precinct. He was already there when I arrived, sitting in a booth, tie loosened, but posture straight. We didn't hug. We didn't even shake hands. We just slid into our seats like two men who'd finally stopped pretending the other didn't exist. We ordered simple: burgers, coffee, fries. The waitress kept giving my father these quick, nervous glances like she recognized him but didn't want to admit it. He ignored them. For most of the meal, we didn't talk much. He asked about the station, about my shifts. I asked about my mother. It wasn't warm exactly, but it wasn't cold either. It was steady, familiar, the kind of silence that didn't press down like a weight. When the plates were cleared, he finally said, "You were right to call me." "I didn't want to," I admitted. "I know," he replied simply. "But you did." That was it. Just acknowledgement. That was enough for me. The next morning, my lawyer filed the paperwork. A counter-restraining order against Serena, plus claims for malicious prosecution and defamation. He explained it in plain language. "She wanted to paint you as dangerous. We're showing the court she's the one abusing the system. Judges don't like being used." Meanwhile, Detective Marrow kept working. He told me he'd be interviewing neighbors. That's when Mrs. Thompson, the older woman 2 houses down, gave him exactly what he needed. She'd been on her porch the night of the fight and overheard parts of it through her open window. "She was yelling, then I heard glass break," Mrs. Thompson said in her statement. But then her voice changed. She went from angry to suddenly crying, like she was acting. It didn't sound real. Coming from a neighbor with no reason to lie, that detail carried weight. It wasn't just me saying Serena put on a show. Someone else had heard the shift too. Marrow summarized it all later at my lawyer's office. Broken glass analysis, doctored audio, self-inflicted injury, incriminating texts, failed witness tampering, and now a neighbor confirming her performance. The file was getting thicker by the day, and not in Serena's favor. Sitting there, watching Marrow close his notebook, I realized Serena's whole strategy was collapsing under its own weight. She'd thought lies stacked high enough would look like truth. Instead, every piece of evidence was pointing straight back at her. I felt steady again. This wasn't just defense anymore. It was offense. In our state, you don't need a marriage certificate for a protective order. Dating partners qualify. The following week, we went to family court. When I walked in that morning, it felt like an arena. Serena was already there. She'd dressed for the performance, head to toe in white like some innocent saint dragged through misery. Hair curled, makeup flawless, her expression carefully set into fragile sadness. If I didn't know her, I might have bought it. She sat with her lawyer, chin lifted, whispering like she was royalty waiting for her subjects. I took my seat at the respondent's table with my lawyer beside me. Detective Marrow sat a row back, arms folded, his thin notebook on his lap. He didn't need to say anything. His presence alone carried weight. When the judge entered, Serena immediately dabbed at the corner of her eyes with a tissue, as if tears were already threatening. Her lawyer stood, launched into an opening statement about a young woman living in fear and an explosive fiancé with a dangerous temper. Every word was tailored for maximum drama. When it was our turn, my lawyer kept it simple. The evidence will show that Ms. Vale fabricated the incident, staged injuries, and attempted to weaponize this court to seize property she has no legal claim to. No theatrics, just facts. Then came the testimony. The forensic tech went first, explaining how the audio Serena provided had been spliced together from multiple recordings. He played sections side by side, one with my supposed shouting, another with the identical background hum, proving they'd been cut from the same argument and rearranged. Serena shifted in her chair, eyes flicking nervously. Next was the glass analysis. Photos were displayed showing the shard scatter. The tech explained calmly, "An object thrown at a wall produces a different distribution pattern than one smashed directly against it. The evidence aligns with the latter." Serena's lawyer tried to poke holes, asking if maybe shards could bounce differently. The tech just shook his head. Physics doesn't lie. Then came Mrs. Thompson, the neighbor. She walked slowly to the witness stand, small handbag clutched in both hands. Her voice was steady, as she described hearing Serena yell, then glass break, then the sudden switch to fake sobbing. "It sounded rehearsed," she said simply. Serena rolled her eyes so hard it was visible across the courtroom. She leaned toward her lawyer and muttered something, loud enough for the judge to look over the rim of his glasses. Then the texts came out. My lawyer read them clearly. He won't give me the life I want. I'll take it. Another. Once I've got the house, I don't need him. And the kicker, her messages asking a friend to lie. Serena's face cracked then. The sadness mask slipped into annoyance. Her jaw tightened. Her hand clutched her tissue like she wanted to tear it. During cross-examination, my lawyer pressed her. Ms. Vale, did you or did you not message your friend asking them to provide false testimony? I was upset, she snapped. People say things when they're upset. Things like, once I've got the house, I don't need him. Her voice rose. You're twisting my words. He's the one with the anger problem. She jabbed a finger toward me. The judge cleared his throat. Ms. Vale, control yourself. But she didn't. Why is everyone acting like he's some saint? He thinks he's better than me because he runs into burning buildings. What about me, huh? What about what I deserve? That was it. The courtroom, silent until then, shifted. Even her own lawyer looked like he wanted to sink through the floor. The judge rapped his gavel once. Enough. I've heard sufficient testimony. He took a moment, flipping through his notes, then looked up. Ms. Vale, your petition for a restraining order is denied. The evidence demonstrates a pattern of fabrication and manipulation. Mr. Voss's counterpetition is granted. You are prohibited from contacting him or approaching his residence, which he retains exclusive use of during these proceedings. Serena's mouth fell open. That's not fair. He's lying. They're all lying for him. The judge cut her off. One more outburst, Ms. Vale, and I'll hold you in contempt. She slammed back into her chair, arms crossed, glaring daggers at me across the room. When court adjourned, I stood and gathered my things calmly. My lawyer leaned in, murmured, That went about as well as it could. Detective Marrow gave a small nod from the back row, satisfied. Serena stormed out first, heels clacking hard against the tile. I followed a few minutes later. Outside the courthouse, the air was sharp, the kind of cold that bites through your coat. She was waiting near the steps, arms crossed, eyes blazing. As soon as I stepped through the doors, she hissed at me under her breath. Don't think this is over. I'll make you pay for humiliating me. I stopped, looked her dead in the eye, and said evenly, You did this to yourself. She flinched just for a second, before her expression hardened again. Then she spun on her heel and stalked off down the sidewalk, the image of entitlement dressed up as indignation. I didn't watch her go. I just walked to my car, calm, steady. For the first time since that night in my living room, it felt like the tide had shifted completely. The criminal side moved fast once the family court hearing wrapped. Serena thought she could drag things out, but Marrow's file left her no room. The DA considered charges, including filing a false report, perjury tied to her sworn affidavit, and tampering with the recordings. When the DA laid it all out, her lawyer pushed her toward a plea deal. She fought it at first, said she wanted a trial, said she'd destroy me in open court. But even she had to see the wall closing in. The evidence wasn't just solid, it was airtight. In the end, she pled guilty to filing a false report. The bigger charges were dropped, but she still walked out with probation, mandatory counseling, a heavy fine, and worst of all for her, a permanent criminal record. That last part cut deepest. Serena thrived on image, on being seen as flawless. Now every background check, every job application, every nosy neighbor could see the truth. The civil case came next. My lawyer hit hard. Malicious prosecution, defamation, emotional distress, property damage. Normally these cases can drag out for months, but Serena didn't have the fight left in her. She settled out of court, paid damages, cut me a check big enough to cover most of the legal bills, everything but the last invoice, and signed a non-disclosure agreement that locked her mouth shut for life. If she ever mentioned me publicly again, the penalties would ruin her financially. That was the end of her control. She couldn't touch me, couldn't talk about me, couldn't even spin her version of the story anymore. Silence was her only option, and silence killed her more than any verdict ever could. Word got around anyway. Friends who once loved being in her orbit stopped answering her calls. The same people who cheered her selfies now scrolled past in disgust. Employers didn't want her drama, and with her record, the doors kept slamming shut. The fall was fast. One day she was smirking on the courthouse steps. The next she was sitting in a near-empty apartment she could barely afford. I, on the other hand, started rebuilding. The first thing I did was go back to my house. The glass shards were long gone, but the hole in the drywall was still there. I patched it myself, smoothed it, painted it. Watching the wall return to clean white felt like erasing her from the space. Next came the ring. I took it to a jeweler and sold it. The guy behind the counter raised an eyebrow at the story, but he didn't ask questions. The cash went straight to my lawyer's last invoice. Clean break. Life settled into a new rhythm. Shifts at the station, late nights at the diner with my crew, weekends grabbing lunch with my father. We didn't talk about the old years we lost. We just lived like they were already behind us. He'd text me about a game, I'd show up, and for once it wasn't strained. It was normal. But Serena wasn't finished with me. Not really. It was 2 months after the civil case closed. I was leaving the station after a 24-hour shift, heading for my truck, when I heard my name. She was posted at the corner of the building like she'd been there all night. No makeup, hair pulled back, clothes plain. The shine was gone. "Damien," she said softly, "please, can we talk?" I stopped a few feet short. "You shouldn't be here." I kept my distance and lifted my phone so the station clock and her face shared the frame. "You're violating the restraining order," I said even. I stepped into the bay, told my captain, and called the non-emergency line. They logged it and pulled the exterior cam clip. I texted the report number to Marrow and my lawyer. "Paper, not heat." "I know," she rushed out. I need to tell you I'm sorry. I was scared. I was jealous. I didn't know how to handle it. I let the silence work." She wrung her hands, eyes darting, then took a half step closer. "We can fix this," she said. "Start over. Forget everything. Just give me another chance. Please." Her voice cracked, real this time, not the rehearsed kind. I looked at her a long moment and shook my head. "You tried to bury me. You didn't just lie, you weaponized it. You went after my house, my career, my freedom. You don't come back from that." Tears welled. She reached for my arm. I took a step back. "You're not hearing me," I said steady. "We were done the second you chose betrayal over honesty. I don't recycle garbage, Serena." Her face collapsed. The proud mask she'd worn for years finally gave way, leaving only desperation. She turned, covered her face with her hands, and I walked past without looking back. That was the last time I saw her in person. 4 months later, her name was just a ghost attached to old paperwork. My life was steady again. I'd cleared out the last reminders of her from my house, replaced her things with space that actually felt like mine. My father came by one weekend and helped me fix the fence out back. We grilled burgers after, the smell of smoke in the yard this time a good one. And at the station, I felt sharper than ever. My crew noticed. I didn't carry weight on my shoulders anymore. When the alarm hit, I suited up, helmet under my arm, and ran with the same steady pace as always. But now, with nothing dragging me down. One night, after a long call, I stepped out of a building into the damp night air. Smoke clung to my jacket, sirens faded in the distance, and the cool air hit my face like freedom itself. I took my helmet off, tucked it under my arm, and just breathed. That was the difference. Serena had smirked and told me to enjoy jail, but I was the one free. Free of her. Free of the lies. Free of the weight she tried to chain me with. I heard she moved into a small apartment on the edge of town. People said the calls dried up and the door stayed quiet. Her smirk was gone. And me? I was still standing, still walking out of fires on my own terms, stronger than before. YouTube just dropped this new hype feature. If you're hooked on this story, smash that hype button. It tells YouTube this video deserves to blow up, and it keeps even crazier stories coming your way.